Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to Force StarCraft 2 strategy. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Terran strategy. Now in this replay, our Terran player here is Goody and our Zerg opponent is Lush. Let's go ahead right into Goody Vision. Again, we're looking at a Terran strategy. What we're going to be taking a look at today is actually opening up with fast cloaked Banshees and then following up in response to his likely response to that, or just what he's likely to have in general. Now with all builds and with everything in this game, in fact, everything really comes down to scouting in terms of your preparation, your responses, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. Everything goes back to scouting. Now what we're going to be looking to do in a general sense is open up with those fast cloak Banshees and then follow that up with Thors. The reason being that of course Banshees are going to do very, very well against any ground that he has. We do have to be wary of Queens. If we have that cloak, we're a little bit safer until any Overseers are on the board, but we do still have to be wary of Queens, and the Thors are going to handle the probable fact that our opponent will be going for Mutalisk. Now, in fact, we do see in this game that they don't go for Mutalisk. The problem is that we didn't scout it, and we started teching up for Thors just in case. In fact, they go for a Roach drop, which is the exact opposite of what you'd like. I mean, obviously, the Banshees will do very well against the Roaches, but they can do a pretty good job of taking out a Thor very quickly. If it's on the board when you get attacked with it. So even though they go for something that is contrary to what we would like them to go for, what we expect them to go for, we're still able to handle it, primarily because of the fact that those Banshees can hit the Roaches uninhibited. Obviously, Roaches are going to do absolutely nothing against the Banshees. Before we go much further, though, just going to make note of this opening build order. It's actually a little bit quicker than what we typically see. You normally see 10 Depot, 12 Barracks, 13 Refinery, 16 Orbital Command. We are, in fact, this time cutting back on one SCV in the early game just to get things out a little bit faster. We're seeing a 10 Supply Depot, 11 Barracks, 13 Refinery, and 15 Orbital Command. So a little bit faster than what you typically see. And that's basically that. Yeah, this build order is meant to get things out just a little bit quicker, just a smidgen bit quicker. And the purpose being, again, like I said, we're trying to get out those cloak Banshees as quickly as possible. We're really going for a very fast cloak Banshee. And then following that up again with that Thor, as well as an expansion as well, because we do see our opponent expand. So moving into his base here, we're going to be seeing some very standard stuff. You want to keep an eye out for a few things, of course, whether there's gas and whether there's research. Now, we do see that there is some gas, but there is no research going down. Basically, you can tell when the research is going down. Now, these spines along the edge, they always kind of move back and forth a little bit, but when they're really vigorously swaying back and forth and the pool in the middle is shimmering, that means that there's research going on. This early in the game, the only research you could possibly be seeing is the metabolic boost. So if you see that, you know speedlings are coming. If you see this gas, you don't see that metabolic boost, keep an eye out for other things. There could be things you could have to be worrying about. Aside from speedlings, you have banelings, of course, Roaches. He could be going for a fast layer tech. All things to consider. This is why secondary scouting is so important. So back in the base, let's look at what we've missed thus far. We saw all the way up to that 15 Orbital Command. Now at 18 supply, we did go ahead and get this factory down. At 19 supplies when this refinery came up, and then at 24 supply, we're seeing this Starport. All the while coming out with some Marines. We do, of course, want early game defense. A big worry in going for this fast Banshee is a Baneling bust. So you do want to make sure you scout. You do want to make sure you look for a Baneling's nest. If you did happen to see a Baneling's nest while you were doing this, you're going to want to actually go ahead and move these production buildings to the front of your wall to doubly reinforce it. That's going to help protect you against a Baneling bust. Now, as you saw, we are attaching this tech lab here on the factory, but before we did that, we actually came out with the Hellion. The purpose is we are going to want to check these Zelnaga towers and then also try to get some scouting. Against Zerg, it's very, very hard once Zerglings are on the board to do much scouting with anything else. It's hard with Marines, especially once the Zerglings become Speedlings, and I completely forgot the production tab this whole time. But I'm not going to go back because this is like the second time I've done this. The first time I recorded, my recording messed up in Fraps. So let's keep going here. Moving on with this Hellion is going to be really essential, aside from scans, for secondary scouting against Zerg. Obviously that first scout always gets in with that SCV, but that secondary scout is pretty much going to be reliant on Hellions. You really can't do that with Marines very effectively. The other option is, of course, to get a Reaper. You don't see Reapers very often anymore, though, because you do need that factory before you can get that speed upgrade. That really cut back on the effectiveness of Reaper. So back in the base, again, we saw that Starport. After that Hellion came out that we are using for scouting, we went ahead and started building a tech lab on the factory right here, and then as soon as the Starport was was done, we just did a little switch, lifting up the factory, moving it off, and then lifting up the starport, putting where the tech lab was, and that allows us to get that cloaking field started researching right away, as well as that Banshee. First Banshee's out, moving out with the second Banshee. Also seeing this expansion going down. The Armory is coming up as well. Again, we're preparing for a transition into Thor's after this initial Banshee harassment. Now, in regards to this expansion, yes, we saw our opponent expand. That makes it a good time to expand. But on top of that, the idea is that we're going to be looking to do a lot of harassment with this Banshee. And if we're able to do enough harassment to set them back economically, and on top of that, we get up an expansion ourselves, that puts us in a very, very, very strong position. So definitely something you should consider doing. In general, pushing out when you're playing aggressively, that is generally a good time to do one of two things. It's a good time to expand. It's also a good time to tech up. And as you can see, we are in fact doing both, expanding and teching up. So again, the big threat at this point in the game, you have to look out for Spire. You have to worry about Mutalisk. Obviously, we're getting that Thor in order to deal with Mutalisk. But on top of that, the other worry is Queens. Queens do very well against Banshees, especially if there's multiple Queens and they can transfuse each other. Clearly, once they have this cloaking field, Queens cannot see the Banshees, therefore they cannot attack them. So you don't have to worry too much about that, but we're going to be following up with Vikings to take out any Overseers to prevent that vision. So the next thing you really want to look for is any Spore Crawlers. Now, you can see here our opponent is going for a counterattack. In fact, they were teching up to a fast Roach drop. That was our Zerg opponent's ID here. And this actually does pretty well against what we have, because all we really have for basic units are these Marines. Now, you're going to want to make sure you pull the Banshees back. A big threat in something like this is if he managed to kill our Banshees, say he had an Overseer on the board and his Queen managed to kill our Banshees, then this push right here with those few Zerglings and these Roaches would actually do severe damage. But since we paid attention to our Banshees, we kept them alive, we kept them away from the Queens, and then once we had the cloak up, he had no Overseers to deal with it. Since these Banshees stayed alive, we're quite easily able to fend off that attack. We did lose a lot of SCVs, but we didn't lose anything too important, basically. So here in his base, you want to make sure that you target fire any Spore Crawlers that you see coming up. I would in fact suggest splitting up these Banshees just to check down here for possible Spore Crawlers, because obviously if you can take out his base here, great. If you can do a lot of damage here, great. But he could completely defend against any more Banshee harassment over here if he just put up a couple Spore Crawlers. So even just momentarily peeling one back, taking a look just to see, and then moving back up here because you do want to try to take out these buildings and do as much damage as possible. Now preparing for these switches here. Since we saw Roaches, Thor's not looking so effective anymore. Roaches can take down a Thor very quickly if they're able to get up close and get a surround, basically. And Roaches do very, very well against Marines as well. So going to be getting these siege tanks, also researching the siege tech. Haven't moved out with the expansion. That would be something you'd like to do. At this point, we're just going to be trying to do as much damage as possible inside of his base. Clearly, he has very little to deal with this because of the build that he went for. Now, keep in mind, most Zerg players aren't going to be going for a fast Roach drop. Fairly obvious, all right? But what a lot of Zerg players do is speedling into Mutalisk, and this will deal with that pretty well. Here's that threat that I was talking about. These Queens actually do very well against Banshees when there's an Overseer. So we followed up these first two Banshees by getting Vikings. Make sure you use them. The Vikings are in the base here. You want to bring those Vikings over, take out any Overseers that may be on the board. That's going to significantly cut back on any losses you're going to take on your Banshees. We did kill 2 Queens. That was primarily because they didn't have enough energy to transfuse. Had they had enough transfuse energy, they actually would have fended off these Banshees quite easily. So finally moving over these Vikings. Now also, obviously, we are doing a lot of damage in a commanding position, but you're starting to see the macro slip here for our Terran player Goody. You want to make sure you keep things up. You could be getting out some more Marines right here. There's really no reason to stop that Marine production, especially when you start to sit on these minerals. But at this point, it is pretty much game over. But these are just general habits to make sure that you always stay on top of. Because the truth of the matter is we have not scouted anywhere over here in quite some time. I mean, it is possible that there could be another expansion up. We're going to hit everyone vision and see that there isn't, but the possibility is there. So the game may not be as over as you think. So just in general, keep on top of those good habits. Make sure you keep up your macro. You keep those minerals low. Don't do things like this. Make a million SCVs. I remember seeing this the first time I tried to do this replay. But yeah, Overall, really good strategy. The general idea, of course, opening up with those fast Banshees, following that up with a Thor to deal with that likely Mutalisk that you're going to be seeing from a Zerg opponent. If you don't see Mutalisk, if you see something funny like a Roach drop, you saw how we can deal with it. As long as we keep those Banshees alive, you should be okay. Just be wary of those Queens. Again, they can do very well against the Banshees. If they're Overseers on the board, they're going to be able to see you, so you're going to want to use some Vikings to take those out. The other big threat, again, being that Baneling bust. If you see that coming, if you scout a Baneling's nest, just doubly reinforce that wall and you should be all set. So just going to that build order real quick here. Started off with that 10 supply depot, followed up with a 11 barracks, 13 refinery, and 15 orbital command. 18 supplies when we saw that factory, 19 supplies seeing that second refinery, 24 supply that Starport came out. Now 33 supply, we got that Cloaking Field research started, 36 supply going for that expansion. The idea being that when we're pushing out, when we're doing damage to them, we're going to try to expand ourselves. And then the 40 supply is when we saw that Armory. So yeah, guys, once again, this has been Force StarCraft 2 strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing here, then please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. Also bringing some SCVs with you, not going to be a bad idea. They can be used for two purposes, one being a meat shield, the second one being used to repair your siege tanks. I'm going to be coming out with an expansion during a push. This is something I talk to a lot of people about. That's always a good time to expand. When you're going to be pushing out, it buys you time to get your expansion fully saturated.